Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Victory Over Vices podcast, brought to you commercial free by addictionhelp.com. I am your host, Dan Hauser, and today we're going to take a look at why in sports and in life you want to be a buffalo and not a cow. Let's get into the show. So, if you haven't been paying attention, Deion Sanders is currently in his first year as the head coach at the University of Colorado after a successful stint at Jackson State University, a historically an HBCU school. Polarizing figure both on and off the field in his entire career. His hiring, of course, as you would imagine, has come with a lot of fanfare and attention. Despite their 4-5 record, Colorado every week they're on national television. They're top headlines on all the big sports shows. They're getting talked about in the same conversation with the likes of Georgia, Alabama, Michigan, Ohio State, and the major blue blood programs, so to say. So you could dedicate an entire podcast episode, and plenty have in the space, to just how his hiring came about, what you think of it, your thoughts on Deion just personally. But I want to focus on something particularly that he said a couple weeks ago before his team went out and played Oregon State, a game that they would ultimately go on to lose. So heading into that game against Oregon State, they were riding a 2-game losing streak, including just a truly demoralizing, horrible loss to Stanford, where they were up 29-0 in the second half and blew that lead. So as you can imagine, with not just Deion, but any coach in that situation, player morale is low, team morale is low. He's got to do something to fire these guys up and to get them kind of feeling a little bit better again. And so he said something to which I think anyone who heard it at first, myself included, it kind of looked at it as like a throwaway line that he might be just saying to say, and that was, "We need some buffaloes. We don't need no cows." And he went beyond that to say, "I'm looking for 22 guys out of this whole entire room, offense, defense, as well as special teams, including coaches, to run into the storm, run right in." And so, once again, Colorado, their mascot's the buffalo. So you're thinking, okay, cool. He's talking to his guys. He's just saying something. This guy's fired up, motivated. Whatever's going on within those walls of the Colorado football facility. However, for some reason, I just couldn't get that line out of my head, and I wanted to look into it more. And so what I found out is that line has much, much more, be a buffalo, not a cow. There's much more significance behind that line beyond just he's the coach of the Colorado Buffaloes. And so it turns out, as I looked into it more, that that's actually a philosophical statement beyond just the literal sense of he needs guys that are Colorado Buffaloes in his locker room. And so the significance behind that is that cows typically run away from a storm, while buffaloes will run right into it. And so that got me thinking even more, to the point of, in sports and in life, we should all aspire to be buffaloes. We all, in our daily lives, want to be buffaloes and not cows. And what I mean by that is that we should all aspire to want to tackle our problems head on. We should all want to have that mindset of that no matter what life throws at us, no matter what happens or hiccups we ever, what gets in the way, we should want to tackle those head on. We shouldn't want to run away from them. We should want to fight through, keep pushing forward to be successful. And so this is particularly true when it comes to mental health and addiction. And so, especially in terms of addiction, we already know that running away from problems instead of tackling them can just make matters worse. And unfortunately, many people who battle addiction, it stems from, I don't want to say them running away from their problems, but they struggle, whether it's mentally or something going on in their life, and they may turn to substance of abuse, such as drugs or alcohol, to kind of self-medicate, get away from their problems for a little while. So in a sense, kind of run away. I say run away loosely because I don't want, to present that in a negative light or negative connotation. I mean, it is something that happens in life. Obviously, it's much easier for us to just say, I don't want to deal with this, than to deal with it. Unfortunately, though, for some, not dealing with it can actually exacerbate the issue and make it worse. So, um, through therapy, through addiction treatment, through mental health treatment, we do learn though that while we don't necessarily have to, well, first off, we learn obviously that we don't want to run away from our problems, and so what we do learn and what can be incredibly valuable is that there's more than one solution. Sometimes there's more than one way to tackle those problems. There's more than one way to be that buffalo, and so I think that beyond just Dion, whether it was a throwaway line or not, beyond just him saying that to his own players, I think it's something all of us in life can take to heart, and that we should all, like I said, aspire to be that buffalo and not a cow. So when we come back from the break, I am going to be joined by my guest for the week, who is Kai Laird, the managing director of the Performance Pursuit. All right, so joining me on the show today, Kai Laird, managing director of the Performance Pursuit. Kai, thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah, it's definitely a pleasure to be here, and thanks for the invite, Dan.
Yeah, of course. So, why don't you just start before we get going? Just kind of introduce yourself to the audience a little bit. Tell us a little bit about yourself, what you guys do over there at the Performance Pursuit as well.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so my name is Kyle Laird, as you can tell a little bit by my accent. I'm born and raised from the Twin Islands of Trinidad and Tobago. Been based in the US for about 15 years. Originally came to do my higher level education, my undergraduate and graduate degree. Uh, Graduated from Adler School of Professional Psychology in Chicago, focusing on counseling and sports psychology. And in 2015, and since then started the performance pursuit with a few colleagues in grad school, and we've been able to expand the practice across several states. You know, we work with athletes, coaches, performers, even higher execs, who anybody who's focused on learning tools and skills to be able to improve their ability to perform and train at a very high level consistently using sports psychology methodology and just overall mental skills training. And so all of our consultants will be a certified mental performance consultant, which is the highest certification by the Association of Applied Sports Psychology. So we've been really privileged to be working with athletes for the last 8 years at the Performance Pursuit, and have worked with several teams, whether high school, college, Olympic, national athletes. And so it's been great to be, one advocate, but also support for performers who are looking, just for some, additional guidance and tools that could help them kind of really master their craft that they're committed to.
That's fantastic, and that's perfect for what we're going to be talking a little bit with on the show today. So, just a quick little background as far as how we kind of got this topic going today. So, like so many of us, a Sunday morning, we're getting ready to watch football. We're getting some stuff knocked out around the house, and you got Sports Center on in the background, and I don't know what it was, but they were showing a clip of a Deion Sanders press conference, and he specifically referenced saying, and Dion has been known for this from day one. I mean, when he first came in, he was talking about he wanted to bring in his own luggage, and he was bringing in his own Louis. When referring to bringing in some of his own players, but he said that he wanted 22 guys on his team, and he wanted those guys to be buffaloes and not cows. And so at first, I was like, okay, well, it makes sense. Colorado, they're the buffaloes or whatever. But then I started diving into it a little bit more, and there is quite the philosophy, I guess you could say, behind it. It's a pretty interesting philosophical quote, because basically what it comes down to is that buffaloes instinctively run towards a storm or runs towards issues or and whatnot, and cows tend to retreat away from it. So it got me thinking on twofold. One, obviously, that's a great motivational tactic for his team, but also I think there's kind of a life lesson in there for all of us, whether it's on or off the field, that we should all kind of aspire to be buffaloes and not cows when it comes to tackling our day-to-day issues head on. So first off, Kai, as someone like you mentioned yourself, you work with a lot of teams, high school, collegiate level, a lot of different athletes. Um, just from a straight, I guess you could say, motivational, mental standpoint, Dion saying that in that press conference, is that something that you feel is something that would in theory resonate with now his players? Do you think his players are now or would hear that and say, okay, what do I need to do to kind of make that happen? I know, he showed some videos too as a team practice, or is that just something where, okay, the coach is going to say that in front of the cameras, but it's not really going to do anything, when he goes back to the locker room?
Yeah, no, one thing that's, Dion is very similar. He's a charismatic leader, right? And any charismatic leader you've probably ever seen, they they're great storytellers, and then to tell any story, you need really strong imagery, right? Visuals. And I think by him calling upon the symbolism of buffaloes versus cows, besides it being the direct alignment of like their mascot buffaloes, it's great imagery in terms of, as you talked about, buffaloes run into the storm, they run into the issues that they're facing. And that's why they're known to be very resilient versus, as you said, cows are running away. And, I did even a little bit of research in that, and that's kind of even showing that, cows tend to languish a little longer in those troubles because they're running away from the storm that's going to continue to follow them for the most part. Versus the buffaloes, when they charge into the storm, they're going to have a shorter experience because the storm will pass over them and they've ran directly into it. So I think what he's done there is really powerful because he's given them a really strong image of what he's looking for, and a kind of call to action. I think for any coach, when you have very strong visuals, athletes are very visually oriented, and they see that and they'll know off the bat, I want to be associated with being a buffalo, and if that's what it means, and it's different values, right? That he's highlighting. People who are going to be willing to be brave, and dive straight into something, no matter, not asking questions, but trust, that you go into it and you're gonna be determined to get the outcome you're looking for. And so, I think that's a very common thing that coaches do. One quick movie clip that even came to me. I don't know if you ever think like every given Sunday, when Al Pacino's talking about every inch, right, and every yard, like he's talking about,
Yeah.
that's a symbolism there, right? Talking about it, you got to stay in the process and work on just forward progression always.
So obviously, sports is an incredibly mental game. There are the physical uh, aspects of it. Obviously, you have to be physically gifted. You have to be physically good to perform. But you could be the most talented athlete on the planet, but if you're not there mentally, you're not able to really perform at the level that you're needed to. Especially once we start talking into collegiate and the pro levels like that. From your experience now, obviously, of course, all athletes are different. What might work to motivate one athlete may not work necessarily to motivate another. But from what you and have seen there with the athletes that you have worked with, do you find typically that these kind of anecdotes or these little stories, these visuals, as you mentioned, tend to overall resonate well with athletes when it comes to whether it's getting them mentally sharper or more focused or more in tune with kind of what they're looking to do?
Yeah, I think a good coach knows how to motivate his players. Like you have to be, you know. But what Dion is doing with his college team might not work for NFL team, and he himself has taken ownership of that, in several interviews where he's talked about he doesn't think he'll ever coach at an NFL level because he doesn't think his coaching style would be effective for that population. And that's why, his calling he thinks is really in collegiate athletics, because of his coaching style. And so I think it really depends. It's different tools and tricks as a coach you have to use to motivate your players. His similar antidote might not work for even younger. It really just it's so uh, you got to use a lot of intuition and emotional intelligence to figure out from your team what's going to motivate them. Um, Versus NFL is probably going to use a much different tactic to get the players going. Um, Whether it's you're looking at goals that they're motivated by, about a certain amount of wins, whatnot. So I think it really depends is the overall answer. But I think for him, what he's doing with that imagery for the collegiate athletes, they're gonna, especially with the new program first season, I think he's really setting down the foundation of what he's looking for and trying to get people to align with that.
So when you all specifically at your practice, when you all are working with your athletes, I guess you could say what are some of the more successful tactics you guys have used as far as working on kind of the mental side of the game, so to say.
Yeah, most times when an athlete first comes in, they typically have something that's going on with them that they're looking for some support to overcome. Fortunately, a big message that we're trying to continue to promote is that you don't use sports psychologists to fix something that's going on. It's similar to if you went to a strength and conditioning coach. It's not to fix a particular part of the game. You're looking just overall improvement. You're looking to progress physically. You come to see a sports psychology consultant, a mental performance consultant. You're looking to learn all these different tools that's going to really help you, be prepared for any situation that comes along, whether it's you're trying to improve your confidence, whether you're trying to reduce performance anxiety, whether you're trying to increase your motivation. And so for us, I would say the overarching theme that we see when an athlete comes to us, it's a lack of confidence. That's the top one. And usually it's a what they're seeing is the lack of confidence is really some performance anxiety. They feel anxious about not performing well, which is tied to that low confidence. So if we could boost their confidence through whether it's self-talk, helping them achieve realistic goals that they're seeing themselves making progress, that those are the few things that gradually over time they're gonna feel like they're improving their overall confidence because it fluctuates so often based on your performance, but also the self belief, which go hand in hand.
No, of course. And you touched on it as well a little bit too. So I would I would have to imagine from playing sports myself and from covering it, that lack of confidence on the field many times is directly correlated to something going on in their life off the field. And so I think when we look at this specific example too, from a more broad perspective, beyond just Dion and his locker room and the fact that his team is the Buffaloes, I think there's something there that we should all kind of aspire to be in life, and that is that in reality, everybody, whether it's on the field or off the field, we all want to be that buffalo instead of that cow. We all want to try to tackle our problems head on instead of running away, because typically, running away just makes things, like you mentioned, specifically in a cow, it makes things more difficult from them as they're running away instead of just tackling things head on. Um, I guess how do you kind of balance that um dynamic? Because obviously, people will come in and see you. You're not always sure exactly what may be going on with them personally in their personal life, or what's going on outside of the field. So how do you, as someone in the field, how do you navigate kind of that? I don't want to say tiptoe around it, but how do you navigate kind of that difficult, almost gray area between like maybe something going on them personally, and then how it is affecting them when they come see you, or even when they're playing, on the field?
Yeah, one of the best things about our practice is that most of our consultants are all masters level with a background in counseling. Like myself specifically, I'm a licensed counselor, but also a performance consultant. So um, there's many times I'm gonna work with an athlete just really on their personal life and their mental health side. And if it's ever then a performance related issue, um, maybe we kind of decide, he's like, oh, I'm feeling good with everything I'm battling personal wise. I would like to really focus our services and time on a performance related issue. So I think it's really about trying to identify what's the priority for the client. And most times for other consultants who maybe aren't licensed and maybe it's a mental health issue, we do refer out to a provider who's going to be able to support them effectively. Because I think you got to identify that, you might be struggling with this stuff on a personal level, but you're working on this stuff on a sport level and you need to take care. If you don't take care of the personal stuff, it's going to blend into your sport. Just like if things aren't going well in your sport, it might impact their mood off the field. So I think the way we balance it is really identifying with the athlete, what is the priority right now? What do you want to focus on? And let's make sure we get you the best support possible, even if it's not with us, because many times I've seen athletes who maybe struggling with their performance to then find out that maybe they're struggling with things off the field and maybe it's even tied to mental health. And that's where we then switch focus and be like, hey, you got to really tackle this, because if you tackle this and you improve the ability to handle that depression or anxiety outside of your sports, it'll make you feel a lot better being able to put out your mind 100% on performing in that sport. So the key is always starting with the clients, and what they want to work on and helping them get there.
So you mentioned a little earlier performance anxiety and how that can uh, result in a lack of confidence on the field. Beyond that one, are there any other common, I guess you could say, issues that you guys see a lot of that you tend to work with athletes a lot on beyond just that performance anxiety? Are there other examples of kind of fairly common, um, things that you work with them on the mental side of things?
Yeah, sometimes it could be motivation is a big one, especially athletes who've been doing it for a long time. Then recognizing, they were always good at a youth level, maybe did well in high school, got recruited. And by the time they reach the college, they start to have maybe some negative relationships building up, whether, with the coach not being picked, just not doing well in school, maybe just lacking motivation to even want to continue the sport and just want to be a just a student instead of a student athlete. So motivation's a big one that we try to help athletes on, because, of course, if you aren't motivated, it's going to be a real struggle to bring your best in your sport, whether it's in training or matches and games. So that's a big one that we help, and it's tied to like goal setting and thinking about what their long term motivation, like why do they compete, and how can we help them harness that passion to bring that best into the sport. So that's one. Sometimes relationship dynamics, whether it's particularly with the coach, or if it's at the youth level, sometimes the youth athletes are feeling a little burnt out because all this pressure they feel from the parents, maybe to stay in the sport that maybe they don't enjoy. Um, so it definitely varies, but I would say the overarching theme that we have seen is definitely the main thing has always been a lack of confidence or consistency, not feeling like they are performing on a regular basis at the level that they desire.
So, and we'll kind of bring this here full circle a little bit. So, obviously, on the field, the main thing is from a mental standpoint is obviously there's going to be obstacles in your way, whether they are physical obstacles, a player defending you or whatnot, or they're mental obstacles as far as like many of the things you mentioned, trying to get over the hump, metaphorically. Um, so sports teaches us, and it's a great teaching mechanism, like we mentioned, to be that buffalo and not the cow. That whether it's a person physically in front of you defending you, or something going on mentally, to get over that hump, to overcome it, to achieve greatness, to win the battle, so to say. Um, how do you feel that translates? I guess you could say it off the field too. So if someone is able to successfully navigate their way on the field, how do you feel that kind of translates to them being able to then successfully navigate their life off the field as well?
Oh, I definitely think it correlates, and it comes down to a big part of the personality for sure. If you have someone, as you said, is taking in those characteristics that we talked about, like being a buffalo, resilience, hardworking, those are values and personality traits. So if you're exemplifying that on the field, most likely they're going to do that off the field. But maybe where you see inconsistency might be due to a motivation. For instance, you might have some athletes who just absolutely love their sports, going to give 110% in it, but maybe unmotivated by school. And maybe they're struggling to stay motivated and going to class, doing the work because it's just not of interest. Um, Overall, that's why I think, we talk about it as well, that sports is a great opportunity to shape characteristics and personality traits, especially in a team sports, because you have to learn to work with others and be coachable towards that coach or whoever is managing you. Individual sport athletes have a lot more pressure to deal with, and and it requires a lot more motivation because you putting in the work by yourself, just you and your coach, right? And so you have to show up on a regular. And when it's time to perform, it's just you out there as well. So I think even that too does require very strong personality traits to be successful. And sometimes I would say that individual sport athlete, it's definitely a lot more challenging. You definitely have to have a strong personality in order to be successful, because you're doing it for the most part on your own, but with the support, of a supporting cast, whether it's parents and coaches. Team sports are a little easier because you're doing it with other people, right? And it's not as isolating. So sometimes you could get away, in a sense, with some aspects, since you could kind of, like I said, kind of fade into the background with the supporting cast. And if the team loses, it's not just your fault; it's the team's fault, right? The accountability of it.
Kai Laird, managing director of the Performance Pursuit. Thank you so much for hopping on with me and taking a few minutes to talk with me about the mental aspect of sports, both on and off the field. So thanks, thank you again.
Thanks, Dan. Pleasure to be
All
here.
right. All right, that'll do it for today's show. Thank you once again to Kai for joining me today. If you like what you heard, please like, subscribe, rate, and review. Obviously, if you're listening to this in audio form, you can find this show as well as all our other shows on the Addiction Help Podcast Network, Spotify, Apple Music, wherever you get your podcasts. And then, of course, the video form of this podcast can be found on our YouTube page. So please go ahead and check that out. Make sure to continue to share with your friends, continue to share with your family, continue to interact with us in the show as a whole. Um, with today's conversation on overall mental health and performance and just everything else going on in the world of sports and addiction, I'd like to take this time to remind everyone, as I do at the end of every show, that if you or a loved one is struggling, uh, please go get the help that you need. We always like to say it is okay not to be okay, but also at the same time, if you are not okay, there are people out there that want to help you. There are people out there that care for you and support you and want to make sure that you are living your happiest and your best life. So, addictionhelp.com, you can go check out to get more information on today's topic, on any of the topics that we've done on previous episodes, as well as some great information and valuable resources, whether it is looking for treatment centers or learning more information about how you can get started to get the help that you need. So thank you all for joining me today. We will chat with you guys next time. Have a good week, everybody.